remember seeing people at DU. Refugees, Jordan.
Refugees, yes. And what are you guys going to be doing with them today?
We're going to be talking to them
and interviewing them.
Dawson students had been learning for a few weeks about the story of refugees. Next, Jess is going to break everyone into groups, and then we will have one of our refugee representatives come and just sit down and speak with you all.
In the past, I've always done a refugee unit, and last year, this has been in the news and has come up with such frequency, I really felt like I wanted to address it.
They asked us what it might be like to arrive as a refugee on a plane to a strange country, without a home, without a school or a job, little to no understanding of the language, and no idea how this new culture compares to the home we left and loved.
How do you talk about it with 7th graders who are from a pretty affluent community?
Go ahead and get out your iPads.
They hear of these things either from their parents or from the news. How do you really make it real? And so I went to David Sutton and I just said, I really just want to go deep with this.
They're trying just to get out of their country to the safest, closest location, and then they kind of get stuck.
I thought that's a fantastic way to show what we do at Boulder Center for Interactive Learning, and that is to take something from the community and meld it together with something that's being done in school.
How did we get here, right? This is where the history piece comes in. Okay?
She composed all the curriculum material around it, and then I came together with her and outside agencies to try and make a connection between real life refugees and who could tell their story to children, and the children's learning themselves about it, and then meeting the actual refugees as a culminating idea.
And he said, okay. And from there, just really got the ball rolling and found Anthony's organization.
I am the program manager for what we call the Commercial Food Safety and Service Training Program. The program is a collaboration between the University of Denver and the Fritz Noble School of Hospitality Management and the African Community Center. It's a job training course, U.S. culture job integration class for refugees, and we get hands-on skills training in the kitchen.
Little cubes, cut them like this.
Throughout the class, we're getting U.S. culture and job integration practice. Basically, it's like a practice for their first job.
You give guests one coffee, you nailed that. Got that one.
We've got the hospitality here, and then we've got refugees over at ACC.
So here at African Community Center and here in Colorado, we are welcoming people who have virtually no other place to go in the world. We greet families at the airport. We help them get settled in their new apartment or house. And then the family comes back here routinely as they enter into job club, learning how to get a job, helping them get their first job, helping kids enroll in school, helping families go to their medical appointments. Our goal is to get people employed first and foremost, get adults employed and working so that they can pay rent and meet their basic needs here in the United States. But greater than that, we are really trying to create really inclusive communities, so making sure that individuals who come are eventually integrated into Denver and beyond, into really our social fabric in America.
So we're going to do a little bit about what is a refugee. There are no wrong answers because we haven't talked about this yet.
I just went through and came up with 5 different questions that I wanted the kids to consider and put them into small groups and had them rotate throughout the room and just write down without any background knowledge from me as their teacher about kind of what they knew. I really wanted it to just be as rough and foundational as possible. Each kid comes loaded with different things, whether that is the news station they listen to and how that affects what they believe.
One of the things, do interagency security checks for like data, advanced criminal intelligence, and terrorism databases. So they're kind of like checking their background. Okay.
You know, we started with, what do you know about being a refugee? What is a refugee? Like, how's it different from an immigrant? Really just kind of flushing out terminology.
Someone who just like treats the higher class and like everyone else can fend for themselves.
Okay. So having preferential treatment for some people based on something. Maybe we don't know exactly what that is yet, but okay, that's good. Write that down.
Well, they're both taking better lives.
They both are looking for better lives. I would say that's a very good statement.
Immigrants come here because they want to start a new life, and refugees kind of come here to avoid.
Escape.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the same way.
Well, I think it's really difficult for even an adult person to understand what it's like to be put in a position of being a refugee. Hopefully one never has to experience that. But it is probably one of the most traumatic experiences any human can go through.
I know even as an adult, I'm constantly trying to figure out differences in some of the things I hear in the news and politically, and there's all sorts of things to kind of wade through at 32. How hard is it to do when you're 12?
Immigrants come from around countries for like education and research, but
it's hard, isn't it? It's hard. It's okay. Keep brainstorming over here. You're on the right track, Noah.
From there, I tried to give them some historical context as to why people were wanting to leave their countries, and so we went into a little bit of an Arab Spring project where they kind of looked at different countries and how the uprising began in that country.
Well, there seems to be like more refugees at the end of 2015 than 2014, like especially in Syria.
Did anything change from your first attempt at answering these questions to the second attempt when you had some more information? Did you guys change anything?
But it's still like, it's not just completely making up lies about refugees.
No, it's not. It's not.
After learning those initial lessons, we set it up and collaborated for the Dawson students to be able to come to the university and meet a handful of refugees and have real conversations with real refugees. So we will have them in 5 groups. So in those 5 groups, we'll have just a conversation. The students have prepared questions.
And then Friday morning, we all got to school. They went to their advisory group that morning, packed some lunches. And then around 9:30, we loaded up the bus. I don't really know where we're going. I don't know what to envision at the venue. I don't know how my students are going to behave. So going in, I was pretty anxious just because it was so important to me. And I thought it was such an amazing opportunity for my students, one that I've never had with a class before.
The teacher was a little nervous. Well, we were all a little nervous about this meeting. Everything we had learned about refugees so far indicated that these were regular people. But somehow, it still didn't feel that way. We really had no idea yet.
What do you think their biggest challenge is going to be coming to this country? What would you assume if you were in their position?
Adapting to what America's like, because it's a whole lot different to what they're used to. Because the news is giving off, not false information, but it's not showing any of the good in the country. It's just focusing on all the bad.
Ask refugees questions and hear their life stories so we can empathize and understand what refugees are, like without just learning from media, because media isn't always correct or can give you justified ideas.
We were about to learn some important lessons about this, and about to meet some new friends that would forever change some of our ideas.
So as we walked into the room, we were kind of led into this almost like a dining hall looking smaller room with a lot of tables. And to the right, I could see Anthony, who I'd met before, but then also I'd say 8 or 9 other people there, all different ethnicities it looked like. I didn't know, who came from where or who was a refugee and who wasn't, which in itself is a lesson, right?
I'm eager for us to have this experience. I'm going to introduce Anthony.
I was apprehensive going in. You have this end goal, but then there's a lot of things that were out of my control. And so as a teacher, that can produce a little bit of anxiety in you.
Hi everyone. Hi. What happens is Jess is going to break everyone into groups, and then we will have one of our refugee representatives come and just sit down and speak with you all.
If you go on the map for the African continent, and go in the central area, you find a little country called Burundi. It looks like a hut. They used to call it the Heart of Africa. There's three major ethnic groups. They call them ethnic groups, but I don't buy into that too much because we speak one language, same culture, everything the same. The only difference between those so-called ethnic groups is the length of your nose. So the way you know that you differ from another person, which is the passport to kill that other person, is how your noses look different.
I know that some of the refugees had experience telling their stories before, a couple of the people that we had come, but this I think was kind of special in that they were able to deliver something to people who genuinely were interested and genuinely wanted to hear just objectively, what is your story, how and why.
When you left Iraq, what was the hardest part of getting out of the country or getting to America?
I'm going to some place, don't have any idea about that place, I know yes, America, USA, and no have friends, no have family. Okay, I have family, what I will work there, how I can have a job. It's a good idea or bad idea. So that's the difficult part would be how thinking about I can live in America. That's the difficult one.
The Dawson students were able to gain that interesting experience of meeting someone that they had, meeting a story and putting a person to that story for the first time, and hearing the truth behind it.
She go to learn ABCD every day.
She didn't know like a seatbelt, what it meant, what this thing was.
She don't know nothing. Because there and here it's different, you know.
In Thailand they eat bugs.
Yeah, they eat bugs also.
Your bugs.
Yes, something like that.
It's like a fried grasshopper.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. You see here? This is snack. You have to fry with the salt, a little bit, the oil, and then eat it.
Fry it in oil.
Yeah.
For a child in a relatively settled environment to be able to comprehend that, I think, is a leap. But I think that they could do it, and I think that they could work their way through it and find out what they took for granted in their own lives and what they didn't know about other people's lives and existences in other countries.
Did you talk to your friends and family?
Sure, every day.
And brought those two things together in understanding and compassion for just another human life and what some people go through in their lives.
Why do you choose to come to Colorado?
You don't choose as a refugee where you go.
You didn't even know the country you were going to until they told you which country, right?
They told me the country last minute, like 2 or 3 months before. I was like, oh, the US has accepted your family.
It's the circumstances that lead. Like if you see worldwide, like there are around 21 million refugees. It's not a small thing, like especially from Middle East and African countries. 21 million who are looking for the opportunity to come to United States and then start their new life again.
I think a lot of their questions also revolved around the refugees' current experience. Like, what's different about the United States? Is it like what you thought it would be, or is it different? How many languages do you speak? A lot of it was just, a lot of their questions were about them as people, which I thought was really cool.
For me, the best question that I heard was, what did you have to leave behind? Did you have to leave all of your things in your home? The answer was all of my things were left in my home. Yeah, I had to take a bag, and it had to be 20 pounds per person, and we just had to leave.
Like items?
Clothing. I was very happy that that particular person was able to respond and provide the truth.
My sister, she was in another school. If she tells you how she survived, you won't believe it. In a group of over 40 girls running away, being shot at, someone, when they were falling down, someone realized that she wasn't dead. She pulled her out of there, and they helped her cross the border to Tanzania. That's how she survived. There were like 2 girls out of a full classroom of young girls who were just running away. Only 2 of them survived.
His
daughter
really
was walking with like 3 of her friends, and
No,
2 of them.
no, 40 people.
40?
Yeah, it was 3 classes at her girls'
I
school.
thought you said 4.
And they started shooting them, and it was all,
2 survived,
including his sister, out of like 40 people.
It can impact people in a unique way, and in hopefully a way that can just tie some more emotion into the reality of what refugees are, who they are, what they're doing, how they got here, why they came here. Just because of what's happening right now in our country, there's a lot of fear being created around a population that does not deserve it. And we need to do our best to raise awareness and tell the real stories. This was an opportunity to do that.
I just think the more you can get out and talk to people and get to know their story, the more kids can do that. I think that the empathy and the kindness and so many of the social emotional development that we want to see in them, I think that those things happen when you get out and you do that.
You're going to leave what's left of your family and friend group are about to embark on a 6-part journey that will take you out of Syria, overland to Turkey, across the Balkan Peninsula to Berlin, Germany, by train to Paris, France, by ship to Canada, overland to Philly, and by car to Denver, Colorado.
After meeting our new friends, we went back to school and got to do an activity where we had to imagine being challenged with some of the situations that refugees might have to go through.
We had to imagine leaving a place that was once our home, but now had become politically unstable, and staying there would put our lives and futures in danger.
It was a really neat thing to be able to come back and continue that, we just heard these stories about getting to the United States and that journey and how challenging it can be, or sometimes, and a couple of the refugee stories, they had less of an issue getting to the States, but it was really neat to come back and then say, okay, now you go do this. I'm trying to humanize this unit for you. Now I want you to go and be the refugee.
They have a civil war raging in their country right now. Their government is deteriorating. There are outside forces all over the place. Mitchell, what is that activity?
Right, so I'm going to give you guys a sum of money, all right? Part of this activity is a lot of times, what do refugees leave their homes with? Money and clothing and maybe some food, right? They don't get to take a ton of possessions. So I'm gonna give you some fake money. Let this be known, this is fake money.
Okay, yeah, that's a concession.
Any learning that you can do that's in an interactive way, where that can open people's minds to different possibilities and how we live, how we interact, different human circumstance. Anything that you can do to promote those ideas is a giant step forward.
The activity, it was like so arbitrary what your outcome was. It was like the roll of a dice and, oh, sorry, you got caught, you're going to the back of the line. Oh, sorry, and it's like, but I've already, I've done all these things and I've done all the right things, and it's like, sorry, life's not fair.
I feel so lonely in Denver because no one else has made it here. I'm the only refugee who's made it to Denver.
Oh my God, Nathan's coming! Welcome to Nova Scotia! Please come right on here!
Hello and welcome to Nova Scotia!
Max. I got stopped by the officials. Which country is this? Munich. I got stopped by the Munich officials, and now I have to wait here for 5 minutes.
Oh no!
Did I die here?
I think your hand was on it, so I'll give you it.
Yeah!
I'll give you that
Had some struggles along the way, but you made it to Denver. You to fly throughout the sky, 'cause you made it to Denver.
They would go 3 to 4 times trying to get as far as they could, but at the end of the challenge course activity, the percentages were actually pretty close to a refugee's experience on how many are successful in getting out. It was a really neat way to tie things back together and naturally bring out some things from my students. I mean, I think if you probably think back to any sort of lessons or classes you really remember from when you were a kid, it probably involved doing something. It probably involved being outside. It probably involved talking to someone that was different. You know, it might have been a field trip. I think that getting outside the classroom and having these one-on-one experiences, I think it's necessary if you want things to stick.
What we're going to do, I have a rubric. I would like for you guys to come up and go into some detail about why you chose to draw what you did. Present the before side first and talk about that. And it's okay to say whatever you thought before we went through this unit. What did you think, about the refugee crisis? I mean, there's so many things in the news, in the media. I think it helps us formulate ideas that may or may not be true. And then you can flip to the back and talk to us about after this whole experience, talking to the refugees, doing these different pieces of this unit. What do you think now? What do you know now? How has it changed? How is it similar? Is it different or is it the same? Okay? Cool? Give me a thumbs up if you understand. All right. Okay.
The idea of learning what someone might have gone through just opens you up to the human experience.
All right, Nathan, you're up, sir.
So, at first they thought they were robbers, so they would hold their bag. Well, not robbers, but they would break into America illegally and then steal stuff, and overall we're bad because when people say refugee crisis, when you hear the word crisis, it doesn't necessarily sound positive. This wasn't the exact words, but a refugee said something about how he brings his hands and his resilience and hard work, and that was really interesting because a lot of people are talking in the media about how they're taking stuff away from people who already live here, but they're just coming to try to live a better life and they're gonna work hard for it.
Okay, the great, you are ready.
This is my before, and it's just Africa, and the country where my guy was from it's called the heart of Africa. So it's the heart and everything's happy, and there's it doesn't look like anything's going on. There's a fish, by the way, that is really small.
So you view Africa as this happy place with a lot of really great animals.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other side is because the government was or not the government, but it was a bunch of genocides and stuff, and depending on how their noses looked, people would start killing each other. And I have the government on here because the government wasn't really helping anyone. So then there's the heart, and it's getting beaten up by.
Before, I just I thought they were just such bad people. I looked down on them a lot because the news is always they never mentioned any of the good things. They kind of focused in on the bad things mainly about them sneaking and stealing, but there's that's just the little part of it, and the whole other big part of it is just them being forced to go somewhere else even if they don't like it.
They switched from saying left to forced, and I think that's a powerful change, right? So someone is leaving their country or leaving their place of residence, that doesn't sound as intense as I think the situation is. And then after they kind of read through some of those articles, they're oh, forced. And just that verbiage itself really, I think, starts to hone in on what's going on.
We think about the things that we get upset about, And then after you learn about what happened to them, you realize that like the things you get upset about really shouldn't matter, because you could be in somewhere else right now, like with people trying to kill you, even as like a young kid.
Well, there it is. Now you're in charge moving forward, okay? All right. Just as
I think Ian today in his final presentation really nailed one of the biggest goals that I had, and it was when he talked about courage.
So I did an editorial, showing like what I saw of refugees before and after, but I kind of had a big changing path of what I saw refugees as. At the beginning, I used to think they were all cowards who like could stay in their country but just wanted to come to America just because they wanted it better.
I was really humbled by what he said, and he is an eloquent kid and he's very bright, and so it doesn't surprise me that he was able to put into words what I think a lot of my students had a hard time putting into words.
They wanted more food or money, but really most refugees are really self-sustained. They could live in their own country without having to leave if there wasn't the problem that forced them to leave. And then a couple years ago, I thought that once all the Syrian stuff was coming up, and a little bit before that, I would talk to my parents, and I thought, well, refugees are kind of the same thing that Sophie thought, that they're all like battling their way out of the country, but that's kind of wrong too, because I talked with the woman from Iraq, and she didn't really have too bad of a time. What happened with them was ISIS started taking over their country, and then the government fought back, and so what happened was a big war-torn country with a lot of people dead, and so they were able to leave the country before they got hurt. So it was still kind of complicated getting the rights to enter America, but it was still easier for them than, say, fighting through getting injured and getting shot or shooting at people. And so I believe that refugees are really people who have a family, have a life, have a job, and they're really strong, because I couldn't even imagine leaving my entire family or my school, everyone behind, and leaving off to a country I don't even know anything about. So refugees are really brave too, and although they might not have the hardest path, it's a path harder than we've ever seen in our entire lives.
That was definitely something I was really proud that he got from that conversation, was just the courage to do something like that. You know, the courage to pick up your life and go to a totally different place. My goal at the beginning of the project was to humanize the experience, and I think that's what we did. But I feel it was so much more powerful, and I feel as though they learned, and really, I do think there will be kids that remember this when they go to college. Like, I do think that, and I think as a teacher, if you can give them an experience like that, then you're doing something right. What better way to learn about a place or about a situation than talk to someone who's lived it, right? So I'll definitely do it again, and with the same goal in mind.
It really encourages people, as it did with these students, to think for themselves and to investigate for themselves. Anything that they've learned or heard about either in their formal curriculum and or their daily interactions with media and news, other people in their lives.
This experience did change us in ways that some of us maybe won't understand until years from now.
As we grow up, we will remain grateful to our teachers for creating the opportunity for us to meet these 5 amazing refugees: George from Burundi, Mupei from a refugee camp in Thailand, Ahmed and Mays from Iraq, and Manny from Bhutan. It is in their stories that we found important lessons in the perseverance and resilience of human beings in crisis,
and learned how much more alike we are than different.
I wrote a quote in my phone that George from Burundi said, I overheard, that I think really, for me, really encapsulated the day. And he said, I believe it was something like, we bring our hands, we bring our resilience, and we bring our work. The biggest takeaway I had from that day was just hearing their stories and just thinking, like, much like my students, wow, the things that get me down, right? The things that I go home and I take home at the end of the day, and how my life is so good, and just how much perspective I left there with, how honored I felt to live the life that I live. You know, as frustrating as politics can be, or as frustrating as life can be, at the end of the day, like, really amazing life. And I wish I had half the resiliency that I can see in those people that we got to talk to.
I love the fact that we're reaching out to kids, to youth, but for them to be able to take that home is a really important aspect, and for me, in my opinion, almost the most important aspect and one of the coolest things. You know, at one time you're impacting someone at such an early age with a really serious situation and story, but you know, you're also possibly connecting with adults as well.
We look forward to sharing what we learned from them with our families, our friends, and other people that we will meet in the future. We hope that by moving people with their stories and circumstances, we will only ever have to imagine what could suddenly change in our lives and turn us into moving people.
Come on, this time I'll do the right thing.